Welcome back everyone to Philosophy 1600 Logic and Moral Reasoning. This is midterm review video. I'm glad to tell you that most of you did very well in this exam. But at the same time, there were also some problems that many of you got wrong, and I guess for the same reason. In this video, I'll go through some of those problems. Okay, let's get started. Okay, question number 1. What is the best general definition of argument? Okay, in the Baruch logic textbook, you have this passage. An argument in logic is more like an argument in the legal sense, where, for instance, a defense attorney will present an argument to the jury to try to convince them by way of reasons that their client is innocent. So, an argument is a series of sentences that are intended to provide reasons to support a conclusion. Okay, so here you see that when you argue for X is your conclusion, right? You're trying to establish the truth of X by providing reasons to believe it, reasons for it, right? Hence, the answer is C, reaching a conclusion by providing considerations in favor of it. Those considerations that are in favor of your conclusion are reasons for your conclusion. Okay. Okay, question number 2. Which of the following is not an argument? A, tomatoes are healthier than potatoes. They have more vitamins and minerals and fewer calories. Now, the reason why tomatoes are healthier than potatoes, right, is that potatoes have more vitamins and minerals and fewer calories, right? So the first sentence is the conclusion, and the second sentence, that they have more vitamins, minerals, and fewer calories, is a reason to support the conclusion. So this is an argument. Okay. B, you should read the Game of Thrones before watching the TV series. It will help you understand the plot and characters much better. So the conclusion here is that you ought to read the Game of Thrones books before watching TV. And why? Well, because reading the book will help you understand the plot and characters better, right? So here you have the first sentence is the conclusion, and the second sentence is there to support the first sentence. Okay, so this is clearly an argument. C, Baruch offers a high-quality education, and it's right in the middle of Manhattan, plus the students are very friendly. So what is the conclusion? C is just listing some good things about Baruch College, right? But it's just a list of facts. There's no clear conclusion that these sentences are supposed to support, right? So this is not an argument because it's just a list of facts. There is no supporting relation between premise and conclusion. So C is not an argument. Let's take a look at D. Running is a great form of exercise. True, it's not ideal for your knees, but it's cheap, accessible, and you can use it to build both strength and endurance. So the conclusion is that running is a great form of exercise. And why? The reasons is that it's cheap, it's accessible, and you can use it to build both strength and endurance. Those three are reasons why running is a great form of exercise. Okay, so this is also a clear case of an argument. Hence, C is the answer. All right. Okay, question number 11. Identify the intermediate conclusion. Now, recall that an intermediate conclusion of an argument is something like a middle step towards the final conclusion. Intermediate conclusion is supported by something, right? some premise, but it is not itself the final conclusion of the argument. Okay, so these are the two key features of an intermediate conclusion. Okay, let's take a look at the argument. A, people have a right to life. B, so people have a right to defend their lives. Now, since C, the gun control violates the right to self-defense. D, the government should not restrict the gun ownership. All right. It's clear that the final conclusion of this argument is D. Everything else are there as reasons, right, to support the conclusion, D. All right. Now, take a look at B there. People have a right to defend their lives. Why? The author is saying that's because people have a right to life. Okay, so people have a right to defend their lives because they have a right to life. That's what the author is saying. Hence, you can see that A supports B. B, then, is supported by A, but it is not itself the final conclusion of the argument. Hence, B is an intermediate conclusion of this argument. Okay, so when you try to identify an intermediate conclusion, you should first find the final conclusion and see whether there is something else that's also supported by something, right? And if you look at this argument, B is supported by A, but B is not the final conclusion of the argument, namely D. Hence, it is an intermediate conclusion. Okay. Okay, question number 12. Identify the intermediate conclusion of this argument. All right. A, the Pope should allow priests to marry. B, currently in the US, there is one priest for every 1,400 Catholics, and the average age of this one priest is 60. C, so the church needs more priests. D, more young men to join the priesthood if celibacy were not required. All right. What's the final conclusion of this argument? You can see that A is the final conclusion. The idea is this. Well, we should allow priests to marry because we need more, that's C, and more young men to join the priesthood if the celibacy were not required. So C and D are there to support the conclusion. Now, once you have this understanding of the argument, then you can clearly see that B is there to support C. Why does the church need more priests? That's because there's just one priest for every 1,400 Catholics, and that one priest is a bit too old. They're 60, right? So, because there are not enough priests in the US, the church needs more priests. Right? So, B supports C. Okay? So, the final conclusion is A, and C is supported by B. Hence, C is an intermediate conclusion. Okay. Okay, fallacies. Question number 14. If you're worried about unlawful police killings, then you clearly don't support the police. Okay. And the choice here, A, ad hominem, C, straw man. Now, the answer is C, straw man fallacy. And some of you actually asked me whether it can also be considered as A, right, ad hominem. And I think the idea is this. You're attacking actually someone's personal character when you say you don't support the police. Okay? Now, the idea is somewhat understandable. In some situations, the remark, "you don't support the police," can be intended as an insult or sarcasm, right? For instance, like this: you claim that unlawful police killings are worrisome, but that's just your bias. In fact, you've never been supportive of the police, right? You're just being sarcastic, or you're directly attacking someone's view, right? However, notice the difference here. In the original argument, namely the argument you have in question number 14, right, the arguer does not actually make a personal attack on his or her opponent, right? In the argument, the arguer is just linking two views, right? That does not necessarily go together, namely being worried about unlawful police killings and being unsupportive of the police. Right? These two do not necessarily go together, right? But the arguer is somehow linking them together. Right? And that's what makes it a straw man fallacy. Okay. But that's not intended as a personal attack on the opponent. Okay. To see that a bit more clearly, consider it this way. Right? You can rephrase the argument like this: being worried about unlawful police killings means being unsupportive of the police. So just forget about you there, right? You're not directly attacking someone, right? Instead, in the argument, right, you're linking the two views, right? When those two views do not necessarily go together. So, though it's true that sometimes the remark, "you don't support the police," can be used to attack someone's like personality, okay, that's understandable. However, this argument is not that case, okay? So this is not an ad hominem fallacy. All right. Okay, question number 17. Abraham Lincoln seems to be America's most popular president. In almost every public poll of past presidents conducted over the last 50 years, Americans overwhelmingly voted for Abraham Lincoln as their favorite. Okay. Now, many of you chose B, appeal to majority. So you thought, well, this is appeal to majority fallacy. In fact, this is not a fallacious reasoning. Okay? Notice first that the given argument claims that Abraham Lincoln is the most popular president in the US history because a dominant number of Americans picked him as their favorite. And this is not an appeal to majority, right? Appeal to majority is when you say something must be true or good because it's popular. But it is not a fallacy if you say something's popular because a poll shows that many people like it, right? And then it's not a fallacy, right? You're just showing that something's popular by referring to certain polls, right? And that's not a fallacy. Again, you commit an appeal to majority fallacy when you say something must be true or good just because it's popular. But if you say that something's popular, right, and refer to certain polls to support your conclusion, then that's not a fallacy. All right? So this argument is not fallacious. All right. All right. Question number 20. According to a recent survey of top scientists, 95% believe that the death penalty is immoral, so we should ban the death penalty. Now, many of you picked A, appeal to majority, as your answer, and I guess this is perhaps because of 95%, right? So most of them, right, thought the death penalty is immoral. So 95%. So that should be appeal to majority. That's, I think, what you might have thought. But take a look at the argument again. It is 95% of top scientists, right? And just think just how many top scientists are there. Okay? So this argument is more naturally understood as fallaciously appealing to authority of top scientists. So the answer is appeal to authority, not appeal to majority. Okay, now let's turn to translation and truth table. Question number 26. We're not under obligation to give aid unless aid is likely to be effective in reducing starvation or malnutrition. Okay, now we should introduce sentential variables. So let's do it this way. A, we're under obligation to give aid. S, aid is likely to be effective in reducing starvation. M, aid is likely to be effective in reducing malnutrition. Okay. Now recall that X unless Y translates to not Y, arrow, not X. Okay. So the above sentence translates to this very sentence. If not S or M, then not A. Okay. That's how you translate unless. Now, I should note that some of you actually introduced a sentential variable for this sentence. We're not under obligation to give aid. Okay, which is the negation of A. Right? Notice not here. But this kind of translation is not generally advisable because you're ignoring negation, which is logical connective. Okay? So what you should do is to introduce a sentential variable for the sentence we're under obligation to give aid, and if you want to express we're not under obligation to give aid, then you should negate the sentence we're under obligation to give aid. Okay, so we're not under obligation to give aid is represented by not A. Okay, so that's generally what you should do. Okay, now let's see how to draw the truth table. So this is the sentence you have, right? Not S or M, arrow, not A. Okay. The truth table of this sentence is what you see below. Okay, so here you have 3 sentential variables. So you have 8 rows in total. Okay, because A can be either true or false. So there are 2 options for A. There are also 2 options for S and M. So 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, right? So that's why you have 8 rows. And you have the first row says A is true, S is true, M is true. Okay, and similarly for the other rows. All right. To fill out the row for S or M, okay, you should just take a look at S and M part, okay, of the truth table. This should be all familiar. You can check your answer with this table. Okay, so I won't go through all of this. All right. Now let's look at question number 27. Either Jan goes to movie alone or Tom will not join. So if Jan goes to movie alone, then Tom will not join, right? Or Jan goes to movie with her friends and Tom will join. Okay. Let's introduce sentential variables. A, Jan goes to movie alone. T, Tom will join. F, Jan goes to movie with her friends. Okay, then it's quite straightforward that this sentence translates to this formula: A and not T, or F and T. Okay. Now, some of you used not A for Jan goes to movie with her friends and had this formula as your translation. Notice the difference. F is replaced by not A. Okay. Now, this translation is somewhat misleading, right? Because not A stands for the sentence, Jan does not go to movie alone. Well, and her not going to movie alone does not mean her going to movie with her friends. Right? For instance, Jan could go to the movie with her parents, so she does not go alone, but she does not go with her friends either. Okay? So it's a bit misleading to use not A to represent Jan goes to movie with her friends. Okay? Because Jan may not go to movie with her friends, but she can still go to movie with her parents or someone else. Okay? So, strictly speaking, you should introduce a new sentential variable for the sentence Jan goes to movie with her friends. And that's what I did here using F. All right. And you can draw the truth table for this formula as you have here. I won't go through all the details. Oh, by the way, some of you didn't include the middle steps, such as the column for not T, the column for A and not T, the column for F and T, but only gave the final column. That's not entirely correct. Okay, you should include column for each and every sub-formula of the entire formula. Okay, so you should properly include columns for T, for not T, for A and not T, and for F and T. All right, so that's how you draw the truth table for this formula. All right. Now turn to question number 28. Tom will go to the concert if and only if Betty does, and if they both go to the concert, they will definitely love it. Okay, let's introduce sentential variables. T, Tom will go to the concert. B, Betty goes to the concert. L, Tom will love it. V, Betty will love it. Then the translation is obvious. Okay, so T, double arrow B, and T and B, arrow L and B. Okay, so Tom goes to the concert if and only if Betty does. And if Tom and Betty goes, then they both, right? Tom and Betty will love it. So that's how you translate it. Now there's an alternative translation. So instead of breaking down the sentence, they will love it, into the conjunction of Tom will love it and Betty will love it, you can just introduce one single sentential variable for they both will love it. Say E. Okay? So the translation would be this. T double arrow B, same, and T and B, arrow E, right? Because in the original translation above, we understood they will love it, right, as a conjunction of Tom will love it and Betty will love it. Okay. But here in this new translation below, we just understand they both will love it as a single sentence. Okay. So if they both go, then they will love it. So if T and B, then E. So that's the difference. And either way, it's fine. And here I give you the truth table for the simplified version. So you can check your answer with this table. Okay. Again, this is not difficult. You can just check it straightforwardly. All right. Let's turn to checking validity. So here's question number 29. Premise 1, either Jack is at work or he's at Steve's party. Conclusion, Jack is at Steve's party. Of course, we should first introduce sentential variables. W, Jack is at work. S, Jack is at Steve's party. Then the translation is straightforward. Premise 1, W, V, S. Okay. And the conclusion, S. That's straightforward. So you have the translation. Then how can you draw the truth table? Well, like this, very straightforward. Now, you should check the validity of this argument. And to check the validity of this argument, you should first identify the rows in which the premises are all true. In this argument, you only have one premise, namely W or S. So identify the rows in which W, V, S is true. And you can see from this table that it's the first 3 rows, okay, that have WVS as true. Right. And you should see whether in those rows the conclusion, namely S, is always true. And take a look at the second row. There you see WVS true, but S false. So you have a situation where the premise is true and the conclusion is false. That means the argument is not valid. So the argument is invalid. Okay. Okay, finally, question number 32. Here you have the argument. Premise 1, Jack will show up at the meeting only if Steve and Nora both come. Premise 2, Nora will not come. Conclusion, Jack will not show up at the meeting. Okay, let's introduce sentential variables. J, Jack will show up at the meeting. S, Steve comes to the meeting. And Nora comes. All right. Then translation is straightforward. Premise 1, J arrow S and N. Premise 2, not and. C, conclusion, not J. Okay. Now we should check the validity of the argument. So here's the argument again, and you have the truth table for this argument here. Okay. Now, to check whether this argument is valid or not, you should first identify the rows in which both premises are true. Okay. Now, take a look at 6th and 8th row. There, you have both premises true, right? Notice that on the 6th row, J arrow S and N is true, and not N is also true. So on the 6th row, both premises are true, and similarly for the 8th row. Now, we need to check whether on both rows the conclusion is also true. So not J, take a look, is true on 6th row, and it's also true on 8th row. So in all rows, right, where the premises are all true, the conclusion is also true. In other words, there is no row in which the premises are all true and the conclusion is false. And that means that the argument is valid. All right, that's it for review. Again, I think many of you did a great job in this exam. I'm very proud. Um, but I would like to assure you that you still have a chance to boost your grade even if you're not fully satisfied with what you got. So please don't give up and keep up. All right? And also, do not hesitate if you have any questions about whatsoever. All right? You can just shoot me an email with questions or request a meeting over Zoom. Either way, it's totally fine with me. All right? We'll start from there. So again, please do not hesitate if you have any difficulty. All right. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.